My first recognition of manipulation and the power it gives someone was what I experienced in the 60s in California, when game playing was very much the vogue at that time. And I remember being in a room, a group of people, and somebody knocked on the door and said, could they come in? And JC, the voice of the group, said no. And the person said, well, let me come in, please. And JC said no. And he said, well, why can't I come in? And I saw then the JC exercise power. Now, the person at the door could have just come in and sat down and joined everyone, or he could have just walked off. But instead he engaged in a power play with JC in which he lost. Very dangerous. And now that would be unacceptable. But it shows the power of how the power that people have. I remember once, after I'd had a very, very terrible experience of someone dropping acid into my drink, and the after effects of that, and feeling very fragile. And I was round JC's flat, and I was lying on the sofa. Now my breathing can be very, very slow, almost to nothing. A very slow heartbeat, so pulse rate. And I was lying there when two girls came in. They must have been about 17. And they were on the fringes of what they thought was the in crowd, and quite excitable. And they came, and JC began to talk to them. And they then said, who's that? And JC said, oh, that's just someone OD'd. So, what do you mean OD'd? They said, oh, he just OD'd, he's dead. And the girl said, no, it can't be. And JC said, yeah, that's OD'd. Later on he said, someone's coming later on to remove the body from here, they'll just dump it somewhere. And they said no. And evidently they were quite excited about this, and being in the room with a dead person that had overdosed. And then the conversation went on, and JC dared them to touch the body, and they wouldn't, and they giggled and laughed, and probably a bit stoned, and thought it was hugely exciting. About 3/4 of an hour later, they were discussing many things, and a siren went off, police siren, a car went off, and JC said, yeah, there's a lot of cops around in Montreal tonight. And I said, Montreal? But we're in Vancouver. And he looked at them and said, no. He said, this is Montreal. And they said, no. JC said, I don't know where you've been, but this is Montreal. Go and look out the window. You'll see that it's Montreal. And they wouldn't, for reasons of their own. And they became more and more paranoid and more frightened. And eventually they left, and just discovered the reality that they were in Vancouver. Now, JC was a real game player. It was probably him who had put the acid in my drink. I don't have any proof of that, but I suspect it was him, because he played an awful lot of games. And it's that manipulation of people that I find quite disturbing. And we all manipulate. We manipulate from children. When children want their own way, they find different strategies to get what they want. It can be through tantrums. It can be through anti-social behaviour. It can be in many ways to get attention and then to realise what they want. And we need to recognise when we're being manipulated. I mean, everybody manipulates to a certain extent, and it's the subconscious. So subconsciously, we have a need for something. We want something, and to realise that need, we then begin to plot. And some of the strategies that we use may last for years to reach to satisfy our need, and we'll manipulate people and train people and things. So I remember when I was young and manipulating another person because I wanted to do psychodrama and practice it on myself, but I needed someone to work with me. And I remember subconsciously, this was not conscious, training this girl to be able to, and drawing into my world, so that I was able to use her as an auxiliary ego, and to tackle some of the problems that I had, psychological problems about rejection and loss. And I remember in one case I had a catharsis, tremendous catharsis and an outpouring, and she was absolutely horrified. And it wasn't until later that when she attacked me and said, she felt abused, and she had been abused, that I realised just how deep manipulation can be, and how we don't always recognise what we're doing ourselves. And we live in a society where we think manipulation is fine. Right from government downwards, we are manipulated and coerced into accepting things that shouldn't be accepted within our society. And we are coerced at work by unscrupulous bosses who want to get more work out of us and make work longer hours, or they low pay, and we're threatened with bad references or being made unemployed, all sorts of, and sometimes in subtle ways this manipulation goes on, and people become victims. And we need to be able to understand what that is relating to, and how, if you are being manipulated, the manipulator has power, and how this power affects not only you but the perpetrator. And what we need to do is we need to challenge people when they start manipulating, when we feel that we are being used. Because if we're being used, we are also being abused. And if we're being abused, that is not a good state for any human being to be in. And recognising it, and recognising when we are in being abused, whether it's at work, or whether it's socially, in our families, we need to say, no, I do not accept this. Why are you doing this? And I'm quite surprised that when you challenge someone and say, look, why are you manipulating me? Why don't, if you want something, why don't you just come out and say, this is what you want? Why go round and round and round and round and trying different strategies to get me to do something? If you want me to do something, all you have to do is just ask me. And if we can reach that state where we can say, well, look, let's be honest with each other. I want something, you can give me, let's negotiate that. And do it in an open manner, rather in this subversive way of getting what we want in a devious and highly negative way in which eventually someone will be hurt. And we'll look at this again in more detail.